Welcome to the deep dive.
Uh,
Today, we're going way back in time to ancient Japan.
oh, wow.
Yeah, we're going to explore these things called Dogū figurines.
Okay.
Have you heard of
I
these?
have. They're pretty wild looking.
Yeah, these aren't just like your normal, little clay dolls or anything. They've
Yeah.
got these features that, well, people have come up with some pretty crazy theories about them.
Can imagine.
So get ready to dive deep into Jōmon period Japan with us today. You might just end up questioning like everything you thought you knew about, well, about history.
I love it. Always up for a good mystery. And speaking of mysteries,
Yeah.
the age of these Dogū, it's just mind-blowing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, picture this. They go all the way back to the Jōmon period,
Yep.
which started, get this, around 14,000 BCE.
14,000. Wow, that's way before,
yeah.
like even before the pyramids in Egypt.
Exactly. Way before those pyramids were even a twinkle in someone's eye.
That is incredible. I mean, we're talking about a time when, well, when people were just figuring out that whole farming thing, right?
Yeah, just starting to settle down.
And here in Japan, they're making these super detailed and kind of expressive figures.
It is amazing, isn't it?
So set the scene for us. Who were these Jōmon people?
Well, they were hunter-gatherers living in these small communities all over Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And, they had a deep connection to nature, which you really see in their art.
Interesting.
And they were known for their pottery. Beautiful pottery.
Okay.
The Dogū, I mean, they're like the most famous examples of that. But these weren't just, decorations.
Right.
Scholars think they were a big part of Jōmon's spiritual life. Probably used in all sorts of rituals and stuff.
Okay, so we've got these ancient people. They've got a strong connection to nature, and they're making these mysterious figures.
Right.
But what did the Dogū actually look like? I mean, can you paint a picture for us?
Okay, so imagine, like, these small figures, humanoid shapes. Some of them are tiny, like you could hold them in your hand.
Wow.
Yeah, made out of clay. And a lot of them have these really elaborate headdresses.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, with all these crazy patterns or things that look like animals. And another thing, they often, they really emphasize certain body parts, like the hips and the breasts.
Okay, sounds like that fertility theme. That pops up everywhere.
Exactly. It's like a universal
Yeah.
thing, right? Connecting to fertility, the cycle of life, all that.
It makes sense. So we see these themes that we still relate to today, even in these really early art forms.
Yes, sir.
But I've heard things get a little weird with these Dogū. What's so strange about them?
Oh, yes. Well, some of them, and they even have a special name, they're called the goggle-eyed Dogū.
Goggle-eyed.
Yeah, it's because they have these huge, almond-shaped eyes.
Oh.
They just dominate their faces. It's the first thing you notice. And these eyes, they're so big and weird that some researchers have even said they look like, wait for it, visors on spacesuits.
Hold on, are you serious? People think these Dogū might be like depictions of aliens?
That's a theory that's been floating around for a while.
Okay, now that's a theory that'll get people talking. But before we get too carried away with spaceships and all that, is there any other way to explain those weird features? Something a little less, out there.
Of course, of course. There are definitely some more, grounded explanations we need to consider.
Okay, good.
For example, some researchers think those big eyes on the goggle-eyed Dogū, they could be related to, shamanism.
Shamanism.
Yeah, they might represent a heightened state of spiritual awareness, the ability to see beyond just the physical world.
Okay, so instead of spacesuit visors, maybe those big eyes are like a shaman looking into another dimension.
Exactly. It's a pretty cool interpretation, right?
That is definitely way more down to earth. But you mentioned other explanations too. What else have people come up with?
Well, there's another interpretation that focuses on the whole fertility connection.
Yeah.
We talked about those emphasized body parts.
Right, the hips and breasts.
Yeah, exactly. So some figures, especially the ones with round bellies and those really prominent breasts, well, some researchers think they represent pregnant women. Or maybe even mother goddesses.
Okay.
And maybe they use these figures in rituals, to make sure childbirth went well, or to ask the gods for fertility and stuff.
It's starting to sound like these Dogū had a lot of different meanings, like they were used for all sorts of things.
Yeah, you're totally right. Trying to say they all mean just one thing, it's probably too simple.
Yeah.
The Jōmon people had a complex spiritual life, and it's likely that these figures, they probably reflected all sorts of beliefs and practices.
Okay, so we've got aliens, shamans, fertility goddesses, all that from these little clay figures.
It's pretty amazing, right?
It is. What other surprises are hidden in the world of Dogū?
Well, to really get the Dogū, you have to understand the Jōmon people's relationship with nature. Remember, these were people who lived in harmony with the natural world.
Right. Right, you said that earlier.
Yeah, and their art, well, it really shows that connection.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the crazy theories, but we can't forget about the context, where these figures came from.
Absolutely.
So how does that connection to nature actually show up in the Dogū? Like, what should we be looking for?
You can actually see it right there in the figures. A lot of have these swirling patterns.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they kind of look like flowing water or wind. And some of them even have features that look like animals.
Okay.
Like maybe they represent animal spirits or gods that were connected to nature.
So the Jōmon people might have believed that these spirits were, like, all around them, living in nature.
It's definitely possible. And maybe the Dogū were a way to honor them or to, I don't know, maybe even appease them.
So we're seeing these potential links to shamanism, fertility, and this deep respect for nature. All pretty complex ideas wrapped up in these figures.
You got it. And it's amazing how sophisticated these concepts are.
Yeah.
Especially considering how old these figures are. Really makes you think.
It seems like we're just scratching the surface of what Dogū can tell us about the Jōmon people, their whole world.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, the more we learn about Dogū, the more we realize how much we still don't know.
That's what's so cool about it.
They're a window into a time and a culture that's so different from ours.
Yeah.
And they really challenge us to rethink our understanding of the past. I mean, what did people really believe back then? How did they see the world? It's fascinating.
Well, I'm definitely hooked. I want to hear more.
Oh, we've got plenty more to talk about.
Awesome. Before we go any further, though,
Yeah.
let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dig into some of the, well, let's just say the more controversial theories about these figures.
Ooh, the controversial stuff. That's always fun.
Including those persistent alien rumors. Don't go anywhere.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're still exploring these Dogū figurines, those mysterious clay figures from Jōmon period Japan.
Yeah, these things are really something else.
Right. Before the break, we were talking about that connection the Jōmon people had with nature.
Right.
And it sounds like it was a really, really big part of their lives.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And maybe even, like, reflected in the Dogū themselves.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you got to remember, for these people, nature wasn't just like a pretty background or something.
Right, right.
It was everything. Their food, their shelter. I mean, their whole existence depended on nature.
It makes total sense that their art, their spirituality, even their whole way of thinking would be shaped by that.
Exactly. And you see it reflected in the Dogū in some pretty cool ways.
Like what?
Well, like, remember those swirling patterns we were talking about? Some scholars think they might actually be like imitations of the movement of water or wind.
That's a really cool idea. Like they were trying to capture the essence of those natural forces right there in the clay.
Yeah, exactly. It's a beautiful thought, isn't it?
It is. And it reminds me of how some cultures believe that everything in nature has a spirit.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Like trees, rocks, rivers, even the wind itself.
Interesting.
Did the Jōmon people believe something like that too?
Well, it's definitely possible. I mean, we know that animism, the belief that spirits live in nature, was super common in a lot of ancient cultures.
Yeah.
And there are definitely some hints that the Jōmon people might have had similar beliefs.
So those Dogū, maybe they weren't just representations of people or gods.
Right.
Maybe they were also like embodiments of those nature spirits.
Yes, exactly. It's like holding a piece of their spiritual world right there in your hand.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful image.
It is, isn't it? And it adds this whole other layer of meaning to these figures.
For sure.
Remember those goggle-eyed Dogūs we were talking about?
Yeah, with those huge eyes.
Right. And we were saying how those eyes might represent a shaman in a trance.
Yeah, seeing into another dimension.
Exactly. But now, think about this. What if those eyes aren't human eyes at all?
Okay, where are you going with this?
What if they're the eyes of the spirits themselves?
Whoa.
Like looking out from the clay.
Okay, that is a little creepy.
I know, right? It's like suddenly these Dogūs aren't just art objects anymore.
It's like they have a life of their own.
Exactly. It's both fascinating and kind of unsettling.
Yeah, unsettling is the right word. It's like, imagine walking through the forest at night.
Yeah.
And you feel like those same eyes are watching you from the trees, from the shadows.
Ooh, that sends chills down my spine just thinking about it.
Me too.
Yeah.
But maybe that's what the Jōmon people were going for,
What do you mean?
Like they wanted to capture that feeling of awe and respect for nature, for the power of those spirits.
That's an interesting thought. It's like they're trying to show us that we're not alone in the world. that there are these unseen forces all around us.
Right. I gotta say, that ancient aliens theory is starting to lose its appeal for me.
Really?
Yeah, the more we talk about this, the more those Dogū seem connected to the Jōmon people's spirituality, their connection to nature, all of that.
It makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
it's easy to get swept up in the sensational stuff, right?
Totally.
Especially when we're dealing with something as mysterious as ancient art.
Yeah.
But you always got to consider the context, the beliefs of the people who made these things. Otherwise, you can really miss the point.
You're right. We need to approach this with an open mind, but also a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely.
But okay, let's talk about those goggle eyes again for a second.
Yeah.
We've talked about shamanism, nature spirits, even spacesuits.
The theories, yeah.
Are there any other interpretations out there? Anything that might help us understand this weird feature?
Well, there's this one theory that connects those goggle eyes to the whole idea of light and vision in Jōmon culture. You got to remember, these people lived in a world without electricity, right?
Right.
So the sun, the moon, the firelight, that was it. That was their light.
That's true. I mean, light and darkness would have meant something totally different to them than they do to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some scholars think that those big eyes on the Dogū might actually symbolize how important sight was to them, both physically and spiritually.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Like being able to see in the dark, to avoid danger, to find your way through the forest, that was crucial for survival back then.
Maybe those big eyes represent, like, a heightened awareness, a really sharp vision.
Yeah, maybe that meaning extended into the spiritual realm, too. Remember you were talking about shamans?
Right, and how they could see into the spirit world.
Exactly. So maybe those goggle eyes are also a way of showing that spiritual vision.
Like, they can see things that are hidden from ordinary people.
Right. It's this amazing blend of the practical and the spiritual.
I love it. It's like the Dogū are always making us think on multiple levels.
They really do. They make us question our assumptions. They make us consider different perspectives.
And it's not just about understanding the past, is it? It's about understanding ourselves, too.
Exactly. And that's why they're so powerful. They don't offer easy answers. They make us ask questions, explore different interpretations. They remind us that our understanding of the past is always changing, always evolving.
Well, my understanding of the past is definitely getting a workout today. But there's one more theory we need to talk about.
Which one?
You know which one. The one that just won't die. The ancient aliens theory.
Ah, yes. That old chestnut. It's tempting to look at those goggle eyes and see spacesuit visors, I get it.
I know, right? But we've talked about so many other explanations that make sense in the context of Jōmon culture.
Shamanism, nature spirits, the importance of light and vision. All of these offer fascinating insights into the Jōmon people's worldview.
Exactly. So where does that leave us with the alien theory? Is there anything left to say about it, or should we just let it go?
Well, let's think about what the ancient aliens theory is really saying.
Okay.
It's saying that ancient people, like the Jōmon, they couldn't have achieved great things on their own, right?
Like they needed help from aliens.
Exactly. It's like saying they weren't smart enough or creative enough to build amazing things, to develop their culture.
Kind of insulting, isn't it?
It is, a little bit. It's important to remember that every culture, every civilization has its own unique brilliance, its own innovations and achievements.
Right.
To assume that anything impressive or mysterious must be because of aliens, well, it's not only disrespectful to our ancestors, it also limits our own understanding of what humans are capable of.
I totally agree. It's like saying, wow, the pyramids are so amazing, there's no way humans could have built those. Aliens.
Exactly. It ignores the incredible skills and ingenuity of the people who actually created those wonders.
Yeah, and the same goes for the Dogū.
Right. They're remarkable, no doubt, but they're a testament to the creativity and artistry of the Jōmon people, not some alien intervention.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different theories about Dogū today. From the more grounded ones rooted in Jōmon culture to the more out there ones like the ancient aliens theory. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what do you think is the most important takeaway from all of this? What's the big lesson here?
For me, it's a reminder that the past is never really gone. It's still alive in the things people left behind, in the stories we tell, in the questions we ask.
Yeah, I like that.
The Dogū, with their mysterious smiles and those haunting eyes, they challenge us to look beyond the surface to try to understand the people who came before us.
It's like they're a bridge connecting us to the past.
Exactly. They help us understand our own place in history, where we came from, what it means to be human.
And maybe they even reflect our present, too.
What do you mean?
Well, even though we live in this super technological world, we still have this deep need to understand the mysteries of life.
That's so true.
We want to connect with something bigger than ourselves, find meaning in the world around us.
You're right. And maybe that's the Dogū's greatest legacy.
What do you mean?
They remind us that even though we might never know for sure what they represent, the act of exploring them, of wrestling with their mysteries, that brings us closer to understanding what it means to be human.
We're a species that searches for meaning, that creates beauty, that's always fascinated by the unknown. And maybe that's what the Dogūs are all about.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Dogū, we want to leave you with a question. What mysteries are you curious about? What secrets are out there, just waiting to be uncovered?
The answers are out there, you just got to look for them.
Exactly. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop letting your imagination run wild. That's what it's all about.
I totally agree. The journey of discovery, it never really ends.
Well said. That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. We hope you enjoyed exploring the world of Dogū figurines with us. Until next time, keep diving deep. Man, we've been on quite a journey with these Dogū, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
From aliens in spacesuits to shamans talking to spirits.
And everything in between.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
But you know what?
What?
I think there's still more to discover, like more layers to peel back.
Oh, I agree. I mean, we talked about aliens, shamans, nature spirits, all that.
Right.
We even touched on those fertility rituals.
Yeah.
But the thing about archaeology, about ancient art, it's always open to interpretation, you know?
Yeah, I like that.
There's always room for new discoveries, new ways of looking at things.
That's what I love about this stuff. It's like we're detectives trying to solve a mystery.
That's a great way to put it.
We're piecing together these clues from the past, trying to understand these people who lived thousands of years ago.
Exactly. And with Dogū, the clues are, well, they're not always easy to figure out.
Right. Sometimes they point in different directions. It's like a puzzle.
Totally. And sometimes the most interesting clues, they're the ones that don't fit into any theory at all.
Ooh, like what?
Well, like think about all the different shapes and forms that Dogū come in.
Yeah, that's true. We've been so focused on those goggle eyes.
Rough.
We kind of forgot about all the other variations.
Some of them are like super stylized, almost abstract. And then you've got others that are more realistic, you know? Like they're trying to actually capture the human form.
Okay.
And then there are the ones that mix human and animal features.
Oh, yeah. Those are pretty wild.
Right. It's both beautiful and a little creepy, all at the same time.
So what can we learn from these different forms?
Well, for one thing, it tells us that the Jōmon people weren't just trying to make things look real. They were using these figures to express something deeper, you know?
Like their beliefs, their hopes, their fears.
Exactly. And by looking at all these different forms, we can start to understand more about their art, their religion, their whole culture.
It makes you wonder if certain types of Dogū were used for specific rituals or something.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Like maybe the ones with animal features were used for hunting.
Or maybe the ones with those exaggerated female forms were for fertility rites.
Right. I mean, it makes sense.
It does, and that's one of the things archaeologists are trying to figure out right now.
It's like a giant puzzle, and we're slowly putting the pieces together.
You got it. Every new discovery gives us a little more insight into the world of the Jōmon people.
And just when you think you've got it all figured out, you find a new piece that changes everything.
Exactly. That's what makes archaeology so exciting. A never-ending journey of discovery.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the world of Dogū. But before we go, we want to leave you with a question.
Okay.
What will you take away from this? What sparked your curiosity?
What mysteries are you going to explore next?
Remember, these Dogū, they're more than just old objects, you know?
Right.
They show us how creative and ingenious humans can be.
Yeah. And they remind us that we've always been fascinated by the unknown.
So keep exploring, keep asking questions, never stop learning.
And most importantly, never lose that sense of wonder.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this adventure, and until next time, keep diving deep.